Hello everyone, this is Kisapniak. I'm on a time crunch. I didn't realize rotation was so soon, but I want to talk about a deck that I have been playing non-stop since, I want to say round 1 Prismatic Evolutions released actually, that has taken my heart and honestly has a lot of very scary potential due to how the metagame has shaped out over time. So you might only have around 24 hours to enjoy it on Pokemon TCG Live. You might have a bit more time to enjoy it in person at League Challenges and League Cups. But I know that if I am going to a couple of events, I'm going to want to be bringing Hisuian Samurott V ASR. That sounds weird. That sounds crazy. Hisuian Samurott V ASR, historically, has not been very good. So what makes me want to play it? We can talk about it a little bit. I'm going to go over the deck list very quick. The Pokemon in it, the trainers and energies in it, and also considerations that you're going to want to have for your own personal use of the deck, and very quick testing. Although, I'm going to be honest with you, I think the deck list is actually pretty okay as is. So here's the base deck list. We have 4 copies of Hisuian Samurott V, 3 copies of Hisuian Samurott V ASR, 2 Pecharunt EX, 2 Iron Valiant EX, 1 Okidogi EX, 1 Latias EX, 1 Fezandipiti EX, 1 Squawkabilly EX. You'll very quickly realize there is nothing that we can actually do to hit Mimikyus, but that's like beyond what I was able to think of. If you wanted to, there's a whole bunch of cards that you can throw in to help you deal with that. I just don't have the time to talk about them right now. All of the other cards in the list, we'll talk about their counts later, because I'm going to show you all their counts later. Hisuian Samurott V ASR. Why? I love this card. I've always loved this card. 270 HP, pretty okay damage numbers, pretty okay ability, pretty high retreat cost, but whatever, and a weakness to an uncommon type. But why is it good now? Well, it hits a couple of really solid numbers. UC 320 and 280. Let me talk about how we get there real quick. Because it does 110 damage for 2 energy. If your opponent's active Pokemon has any damage counters on it, 110 more damage. So with Iron Valiant, we can do 20 damage, then we do 110 plus 110, 240 damage that knocks out Raging Bolts. Out of Binding Mochi, we have Pecharunt in the deck, so you can add Binding Mochi to that, 280 damage. Add our ability, Mooncleave Star. During your turn, you may put 4 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. That is 320 damage right there. For only 2 energy, in a format where Dark Patch is still legal, that is a lot of damage that you can hit. For a pretty low cost, all things considered, and one that you can't really get buddied out of doing. You don't really rely on item cards to get there. You can attach turn 1, turn 2, attach again, there you go. As I said, the costs are very low, and turn 2 under Badoo is so easy to do. But it is also a good field destroyer. That ability is any one of your opponent's Pokemon. So pair that with the Iron Valiant for a second, right? You go retreat into Iron Valiant, 20 damage somewhere. Then you can use Pecharunt to send your Hisuian Samurott. Mooncleave Star, 4 damage counters on the target from the Iron Valiant. They're at 6 damage counters. That knocks out a Pidgey, that knocks out a Duskull, that knocks out a lot of the attacking basics that people started running in order to deal with Badoo. Knocks out a whole lot of stuff. That ability also just straight up knocks out a Badoo, which gives you the option to swing into something else instead, which is absolutely amazing. That turn 1, you are taking a knockout on something 60 HP or lower, and another 110 damage on top of that, or even just knocking out a 240 HP target outright, 110, 110 plus 20 to 240, you're destroying a field really quick for very low damage. It is very effective, very strong, very quick, and that is what makes Hisuian Samurott V ASR itself very strong. So there's a catch to doing that, right? We need to get our damage counters out, we need to reset to the active again. You can't really hit that big of numbers without damage modifiers, and wall decks are a little bit difficult. But we have Iron Valiant EX to get those damage counters down every single turn. We have Pecharunt EX in order to, after we already retreat into Iron Valiant, send in one of our dark types, in this case Samurott. We have Binding Mochi to increase that damage by 40, because Pecharunt poisons ourselves, and suddenly that full combo is very easy to do. We'll talk about wall decks later. We have an answer to some of them. So that support cycle is Latios EX retreating to the Iron Valiant, 20 damage anywhere. It's good for the shredding, as I mentioned earlier. It activates our 110 plus 110 damage as well. It's great. Lovely. To get back out of the active Pecharunt EX, it sets up our Binding Mochi. It also sets up our other secondary attackers. The Baby Samurott has an attack that does 180 damage for 3 Dark Energy. You normally don't need to use it, but In the case that you do, Binding Mochi gets you up to 220. That is a Pokemon without an ability that can hit Cornerstone that is hitting 220, which does knock it out. And you can also go up to the 240 with the Iron Valiant ping, which is overall pretty okay. And we have another secondary attacker as well in the form of that Okidogi, which I will talk about in just a second. It's good into block lax because you can keep sending in your dark Pokemon over and over and over again, no matter what's going on your field. And it's also a solid late game attacker for 2 dark energy, so 1 dark patch, 1 dark energy, just like Samurott. 60 damage for each prize card your opponent's taken. Assume your opponent's taken 5 prize cards, you're hitting 300 damage. Oh, Iron Valiant ping, that's 320 damage. That is enough to knock out Dragapult EX, which is one of the premier Pokemon in format right now. There are some issues with the cycle. Of course, when your V-Star is in the active, if your opponent does not knock you out, it's kind of stuck in the active a lot of the time. But we do have a secondary attacker, which you can also use that does not rely on your opponent having damage counters on their active, and Prime Catcher to position yourself a little bit. And of course, you can always just get knocked out. A lot of decks are very aggro right now, so you getting knocked out is pretty reasonable, and it's easy to charge up another Samurott, so honestly, that's not all too bad to rely on getting knocked out. You also do have a whole bunch of Pokemon that you need to get out in order to set up your cycle. So with this deck, always blind first. You're in a very blind second format right now, which means that going blind first is actually very, very, very likely, even when your opponent gets to choose. So they're likely going to choose second, you get to go first. You have the Carmines, you have the Squawkabilly, and you will be able to draw a lot of cards in your deck and get a lot of cards out onto the field very quickly. You'll be able to flow your cards very quickly, and you'll be able to set up a massive field of a whole bunch of different attackers very quickly. And is it exactly consistent? Some people would argue no, but we've built this deck in order to be able to chain those energies and get out all those Pokemon as reliably as possible. I'd argue that the way that it's built, you're able to get out so many of these big basic Pokemon that you need for your combo very reliably, to the point to where even if you can't get everything, you can get something that is able to do good enough of a job until the following turn, most of the time. Of course, we have our other support Pokemon, the Squawkabilly, as I mentioned earlier. Discard, draw 6, turn 1, always good. You like drawing cards, you like flowing through cards. The Fezandipiti EX, you can technically snipe with a Valiant Ping to do 120 damage, but it's not really relevant. More importantly, when you have a Pokemon that is stuck in the active, like the Okidogi, and if your opponent has a pretty weak field, and you don't want to keep your Okidogi or your Samurott poisoned, you can Pecharunt into the Fezandipiti, then retreat back. That way you're not poisoned, you're not incrementing those damage counters. It's sometimes useful. More importantly, it has the ability to flip the script. Whenever you're knocked out, draw 3. That helps you hit your combo pieces and your chain pieces more reliably. It's just a good card. Just run it. And then we have Okidogi EX. It doesn't have an ability, so it hits Cornerstone. Whenever you're bricked, it has an attack that does basic energy acceleration, which is sometimes okay, genuinely. Squawkabilly has a similar attack as well, but it's not really relevant because you don't want to leave a 160 HP Pokemon active. 250 is a bit more reasonable. And the attack also is 130 plus 130 if you are poisoned. Pecharunt will guarantee that you get that poison on the Okidogi. We do run those 2 Pecharunt in order to make it pretty reliable. It's 2 Dark and a Colorless, which is a slightly higher attack cost, but you can get there normally with a Dark Patch and then 2 manual attaches, or 1 manual attach, 2 Dark Patch, because all of your other Samurott and other attackers only need 2 energy. You normally have an energy to spare at some point in the mid game in order to get that Okidogi charged up. And hitting 260 damage while poisoned is pretty good, because Binding Mochi, 300, Valiant Ping, oh, we're hitting the magic number 320 again. So you are able to knock out Dragapults very reliably with a whole bunch of attackers in this deck, no matter what's going on, which is absolutely awesome news because Dragapult is one of the big bad decks in this format, and none of this relies on your opponent's Pokemon being statused, so even if you're against this weird Raging Bolt deck or some weird ancient deck that has all of these tools to prevent status, you can still hit right through them, hit big damage, and get your numbers across reliably. Let's talk about the trainers and energies. This deck list is very, very streamlined. You have 3 goals. You gotta keep your energies out, you gotta draw cards, and you gotta make sure that your board is positioned in a way to target your knockouts where you want them to be, right? And so let's go over them just really quick. We got 3 research, 3 Carmine. Carmine is to draw on turn 1 going first. Research is just best discard draw in the game. 3 Iono, late game disruption is always good, especially with Fezandipiti. You can normally get your hand back up after you Iono when you're at a low card count. You could consider swapping 2 of them to Roxanne and another one for another Carmine, but normally I find that 3 Iono is very beneficial a lot of the time, and early game Ionos are always also very effective, especially because you only run those 6 draw supporters in its current state. You also run 2 Arven, just because most of your combo pieces can be found off of any given item card. So having Arven is normally pretty alright, plus it also searches Prime Catcher or Counter Catcher in mid-game, which is awesome, and your Binding Mochis, which is your damage amp. On that topic, 3 Binding Mochi, get your damage numbers up, hit those magic numbers that we were talking about all video. You hit those 320s very easily, you hit those 280s very, very easily. You're hitting all your magic numbers with that. 2 bosses orders, 1 counter catcher, just to make sure that you have a bit of field control, 1 Hisuian heavy ball. You run only 1 of Latias, but you can probably bump it to 2 and cut 1 of the Hisuian heavy. But you run so many basic Pokemon, Hisuian heavy ball isn't a bad idea anyways. 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, search your Pokemon, get them out, get them quick. Awesome. Dark Patch, make sure that if you for some reason ever miss an energy drop, you can recuperate by getting another energy into play, or you can start charging up multiple other Pokemon so that you have liabilities out of the way, or if you get Iono or Disrupted in mid-game. 2 PokéStop, discard draw, discard top cards of your deck, draw some item cards. You might be able to get out of a couple of sticky situations like that, and because this deck is very reliant on getting all your pieces, extra draw is always good. 2 Night Stretcher, get back some of your Pokemon. You run very bulky Pokemon lines, you don't really need that much recovery, but the Night Stretchers are nice. 2 Earthen Vessel, guarantee your Dark Energies. Don't really need to elaborate on that all that much, and that is all. The line is very simple for how this deck is built. You should be able to hit all of your combo pieces most games, and you should be able to hit those big numbers every single time when you go for it. However, some things to consider. An extra Latias might be nice because you really need Latias in a lot of positions. Lumineon V, sometimes they'll guarantee a turn 1 Carmine or some very particular routing, but honestly I haven't found I needed it. Just wanted to bring it up though. Pecharunt, it's a bit of a lock attack, 10 damage, poisons your opponent's active Pokemon, they can't retreat, and then they take 60 damage between turns, so it's 70 damage, that's enough to knock out a Mimikyu. Pretty important number, I'd argue, in order to try and hit. So if you are worried about Mimikyu and wall decks that will run things like Mimikyu, or if for some reason your local scene has an Aegislash player, you can run Pecharunt to deal with that. And then you don't run any switch cards. Running things like Surfer or Switch can get your positioning a little bit easier around those Iron Valiants, but I found that Latias and Pecharunt EX is all you really need to focus on. One thing I didn't put on the graphic, you can run a Monkey Dory, which for 1 Dark Energy on its ability moves 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to your opponent's Pokemon. That is very relevant with Pecharunt EX because you can Pecharunt EX, poison yourself, and against a wall deck, you're accumulating 2 damage counters every turn that you can then move over with Monkey Dory. It's an okay way to deal with wall, but most of them run Serena, especially the one that's by, I want to say, iCaterpie, that just came second in Stockholm Regionals. Um, Considerations like that could also work out in order to try and act as a bit of an edge over your opponent, but honestly, the list just wants to do what it does very effectively, very quick. There is no deck list at the end. You know what? I'm going to get to that later. Go back to the front. There we go. So again, here's the deck list. In full, the deck list is also available down in the description for a copy-paste into Pokemon Live, TCG Sim, or if for some reason you're printing proxies about a deck that's about to rotate, go for it. And that's about all we have here. Skipping through it all again. So yeah, if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe down below. It's the reason that I know that you guys appreciate content and make me want to make more. Also, I didn't say it in my first video, and I very much regret it because the ratio is not that good. Please like the video. Liking the video boosts it to the algorithm, it makes more people want to see it, makes it pop a little bit more, and maybe can even get me enough clicks to where I can start to really grow this thing and start to make a lot of very special content. You can also go onto the Purple streaming site and follow me there because I like streams sometimes. And a couple of other socials are also on the slides here, and you'll also find them down in the description. And of course, the slides in this video are also available down in the description. There was an issue with the Goldango slides not actually being the Goldango slides for a little bit on my last video, but that is also corrected. On that note, do check out my last video if you want to figure out some new notes about rogue deck building, and try and think about some of the ways that I've applied some of those principles to this deck in order to make a deck that is able to do a whole lot of things very effectively and hit those big numbers very quickly. that is all we really have time for today. I gotta get this video out so that you guys can see it before rotation hits. So, thank you for your time, and I'll catch you guys all later.